A group of criminals is sent to a prison in the suburbs of Mongolia to serve their sentences. What some of them do not know is that what awaits them is far more than just tedious labor. Behind the prison lies a horrifying secret. To establish absolute authority, the guards do everything they can to torture the prisoners. They prepare a dog bowl for each person. The instructor demanded that their prisoners eat their meals like dogs. The short-haired woman just complained a bit and was immediately beaten. Her body was smeared with red jam. The female instructor threatened that anyone who violated the rules twice would have their sentence extended by 1 month. At this point, all the prisoners chose to compromise. Late at night, when everything was quiet, the male instructor, with nothing better to do, decided to mess with the sleeping prisoners, only to unexpectedly find an empty bed. Who would have thought someone would choose to escape in the freezing weather? But this prison is too remote, and after running the whole night, he still couldn't escape the mountainous area. In the end, he was caught by the guards waiting in the prison. The escapee was in big trouble now. The male instructor beat him up severely in front of everyone. To set an example, the instructor punished the escapee by locking him in a dog cage for 3 days and warned the remaining prisoners that if anyone else tried to escape, their cellmates would face the same punishment. In the following days, these prisoners suffered even harsher torment. What they didn't know was that in a hidden tent somewhere in the prison, the female instructor was gently telling a story to a girl who was curious about why she was there. The female instructor coaxed and deceived, saying that your existence can save more lives. Outside the tent, the prisoners finally received a piece of great news. The instructor said that the warden of the prison would hold a meeting today to hear everyone's opinions, but anyone with a discerning eye knew this was just a formality. If they really spoke their minds, the warden would just turn around and leave, making their lives even harder. At the meeting that night, the prisoners behaved unusually calm, and only after the warden left satisfied did they gather to whisper among themselves. If they continue to stay here, both physically and mentally, they will eventually collapse. These people finally made a bold decision, which is to collectively escape tonight. Finally, waiting until midnight, the prisoners were just about to act when a car suddenly drove into the prison. Looking through the window, 2 men hurriedly walked into the secret tent. Immediately after, the male instructor came to the dormitory, and everyone chose to pretend to be asleep. The male instructor quietly woke up Ah Chiang, who was usually more obedient, and took him out of the dormitory. The few pretending to sleep immediately sat up, unable to understand what kind of trouble the male instructor was up to. At this moment, someone noticed that the guards standing outside had all been withdrawn, which was definitely a perfect opportunity for a jailbreak. They couldn't wait for Ah Chiang any longer, so they quickly put on their clothes and slipped out of the dormitory. What the others didn't know was that at this moment, Ah Chiang had already been taken to the secret tent, where someone injected something into his neck. Before long, as if possessed, Ah Chiang started to crazily attack the people in the tent. For a moment, alarms blared throughout the prison, and the door of the secret tent was violently pushed open as several zombies rushed out, biting anyone they saw. The support team kept firing, thinking they had wiped out all the zombies, but unexpectedly, someone suddenly sprang up from the pile of bodies. At this moment, the entire squad was wiped out by the now zombified prisoner, Ah Chiang. The prisoners attempting to escape also realized something was wrong and began to flee desperately, but their speed was no match for the zombies. Soon, someone was unfortunately knocked to the ground. Meanwhile, the warden, being rather cunning, hurried back to his office and found a box. While everyone was fighting the zombies, he quietly approached a truck and shot the zombie Weishuo. The warden quickly jumped onto the truck, his arm bleeding, but he couldn't worry about that now. He floored the gas pedal, leaving the male instructor standing there, angrily roaring in frustration. Unknowingly, the sky had already brightened. A prisoner was running wildly in the forest when suddenly a dark figure pinned him down. It was the male instructor who had escaped. Now, with zombies as the greatest threat, everyone chose to put aside their hatred. They saw a truck parked on the road from a distance. This place is remote, and they had to find a means of capture no matter what. A few brave prisoners quietly approached the truck, only to find 2 zombies hidden inside. The instructor and the criminals joined forces to fight the zombies, but unfortunately, the commotion was too loud, attracting all the nearby zombies, and the car key broke in the rush. Lucy proposed forming a combat team to go to the surface to find her father, but upon hearing that the shelter door needed to be opened, most of the people present stood up in opposition. The committee's matron made the final decision, saying it was not the time to go out, but rather to find a way to protect the shelter. Lucy knew she couldn't persuade these naive people, so she came up with a bold idea. Early the next morning, she took her packed luggage and, escorted by her younger brother and cousin, quickly arrived at the gate leading to the surface. It turned out Lucy wanted to go out alone to find her father. Her cousin, worried about her safety, planned to go along. As a result, Lucy directly knocked them unconscious. The moment she pressed the red button, the heavy isolation door slowly opened, blinding sunlight poured in, and Lucy squinted as she stepped out boldly. The first thing that came into view was yellow sand piled with white bones, and corpses in various postures were everywhere. As far as the eye could see, there was only endless ruin and desolation. This is the post-nuclear war wasteland. But not everyone living here represents savagery and bloodshed. A survival organization called the Brotherhood of Steel has taken it upon themselves to guard the wasteland since their inception. They are dedicated to collecting and researching pre-nuclear war scientific technology, possessing not only highly mobile aircraft but also astonishingly powerful armored knights. Mark is the most inconspicuous member of the Brotherhood, although his dream since childhood was to become an armored knight due to his mediocre aptitude, and with his age already surpassing most reserve trainees, let alone achieving his dream, he doesn't even qualify to become a knight's attendant. That day, shouts suddenly came from the camp. It turned out that another group of trainees had been promoted to official soldiers, including Mark's best friend Dane, who had been transferred to the very role he dreamed of, a knight squire. Mark felt stifled and could only vent his frustration and resentment with a roar. Early the next morning, screams came from the dormitory. It turned out that Dane had been cut by a blade in his shoe. This was obviously someone deliberately causing trouble, and the indignant Mark became the prime suspect. He was brought before the base commander, and faced with the barrage of questions from the superior, the inarticulate Mark could only repeatedly insist that he did not harm Dane. But such an explanation was as powerless as a blank sheet of paper. Just as the commander was about to issue a punishment order, Mark suddenly showed genuine emotion, expressing deep gratitude. The commander had given him a place to stay, and his lifelong dream was to help the Brotherhood make the world a better place. The latter saw that Mark was not lying, and immediately ordered his promotion to knight's attendant. And this position originally belonged to his good friend Dane. Mark walked up to him without hesitation because his conscience was clear, and Dane would never suspect that Mark hid the blade. In front of everyone, Mark and a few others completed the oath, officially becoming squires of the Steel Knights. And their first task was to go to the wasteland to find a man with a dog. The man was said to be carrying a magical item capable of destroying a country. After receiving the mission objective, Mark, carrying a large backpack, followed a knight, and the two boarded an aircraft, quickly heading towards the wilderness. Seeing that he was one step closer to his dream, he felt both excited and anxious. Meanwhile, several bounty hunters were commissioned to dig out a buried mutant to give it some air. They quickly arrived at a cemetery with nutrient solution hanging around, assuming the target was here. To prevent a ghoul from emerging, the leader brought a hen, as ghouls are said to dislike this animal. Several people worked together to dig out the coffin, pulling open the lid along the ropes, and a large pitch-black hand reached out. Everyone was so startled they stepped back repeatedly, only then seeing clearly the figure that emerged. The person's nose was missing a piece, and the surface of their skin was covered with radiation burn marks. The leading man noticed his extraordinary combat ability and even had the idea of recruiting him, threatening that if he didn't agree, he would be put back into the coffin. The mutant chuckled, suddenly stepped forward like a phantom, and in just an instant, 3 bounty hunters lay dead on the ground. That concludes the content of the first episode of Fallout, which mainly explains the story background and introduces the 3 main characters, marking the beginning of the story. The subsequent story will depict the adventures of 3 people journeying together in a wasteland world. Lucy and Mark's background should be relatively simple, with only the last appearing mutant having a more unique identity. According to the game's background setting, humans exposed to radiation for a long time will mutate into ghouls. The surface skin and flesh show signs of alteration, but overall lifespan is significantly extended and there is a certain degree of radiation immunity. This protagonist in the show was born before the nuclear explosion and has survived until now due to the characteristics of a ghoul and years of sleeping in a tomb. Viewers who haven't played the game need not worry about not understanding the plot. It seems the series only borrows the game's background setting, with most of the storyline being original. However, the reason why the female leader captured Lucy's father hasn't been explained yet, which might be related to the main storyline, as her advice to Lucy is quite intriguing. Alright, that's it for today. See you next time.